Discussion, it's the heart of the matter. Serving up opinions on a silver platter. It's a grind. The information getting, bringing your got so hot you'll be sweating. These two dudes with attitudes will put you in the mood for a plate full of brain food. So don't delay, my daughter, my son. Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.
Welcome to Promoter 101, episode 232. As always, with me, my partner in crime, W. Lou Pierce.
Oh, Dan, good to be back here. Good to be talking to everybody. How about that updated theme song from our boy Craigie Fresh, Craig Newman, dropping in some new funk all over the Promoter 101 theme song. Dan, what do you think about that?
Kind of like when Rush did Roll the Bones and they had that little rap section in the middle. It was, you're not expecting it, but you like it.
Big thanks to Craig Newman, our good friend from Paladin Artists, for a little remix on that. Welcome, of course, to Promoter 101. Today, we've got a doozy of an episode, joined by the flashiest man that we know in London, Senbla's Ollie Rosenblatt, a promoter and a producer, growing from a London town to global business. He's a returning guest, Dan. He was on our podcast 8 years ago. Can you believe that? On episode 25. A lot has happened to Ollie, and a lot has happened to the business, and Ollie's back for Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. Love it. Show me love, baby.
Show me love.
Love me some Ollie Rosenblatt. This is going to be a special episode. What he is doing in the world of creative events. And with that saying, he's creating some of the most unique IP out there. And he's going to go into that a little bit and just talk about his overall vibe, which is just outstanding.
Promoter 101 starts right now.
They intend to live forever. So far, so good. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
Well, there's over 225 episodes of the Promoter 101 podcast available for your education and enjoyment needs at promoter101.com. That's PROMOTER, the number 101 with a little dot and then a COM at the end. Promoter101.com or .net. We'll find you both ways, or you'll find us both ways. Whatever. We go both ways, apparently.
And, of course, we're always in the conversation all over social media. On X, the show is at Promoter 101. I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Dan is at The Jew, of course. Over on Instagram and Threads, it's Steiny at Promoter 101. Dan is at Dan Presents, and I'm W. Luke Pierce.
Steiny and Luke would like to remind you that a clean desk is a sign of a cluttered desk drawer. Promoter 101.
Luke, shall we talk about what's going on in the industry right now? As we call it here, the news of the week, a.k.a. now the news of the month.
Let's get into it, Dan. Coming to you on this podcast on the backdrop of the NEVA 2025 conference. It's underway as we're recording this podcast, and not about you. Got a little bit of FOMO for not being there with all the crew in Milwaukee this year.
Amy Loeb, Jeff White, Pat May, our buddies at the Paps Riverside team, Gary and Matt. Yeah, dude, I want to be there.
Yeah, it sounded like an awesome event. All the photos, the feedback, everything from it. You know, they had events at the Miller High Life in Turner Hall, and they culminated in the Brew City Bash at the Rave in the Eagles Ballroom. It brought together more than 2,000 independent venue owners, promoters, artists, marketers for panels, showcases, and the debut of an anticipated study, the State of Live Economic Study, which I want to break down here, Dan. So this new report, which dropped just a couple days ago as we record this, something worth reading, especially if you work in the venue or promoter ecosystem. This one might hit you a little hard. It's a little woe is me, Dan. You know, a few episodes we broke down how the live music landscape has become this barbell, an enormous investment at the top and a crushing squeeze at the bottom. And basically, we now have the numbers to say that's exactly true. So let's do a quick little reality check here with NEVA and dive into this report. So from the State of Live here, they reported that Independent venues, festivals, and promoters generated more than $85 billion in GDP and $150 billion in economic output last year, supporting more than 900,000 jobs. Despite all that, 64% of the members, the stages that they represented in this report, ran at a loss in 2024. And 60% of those stages expect higher artist fees. And similarly, a similar number anticipate higher costs across staffing, insurance, rent, and beverages. So, in short, pretty huge impact and what could be an existential risk for the artist development program here. But NEVA didn't end with just woe is me stuff. They came back with some solutions. So I'll take 30, 60 seconds here to kind of recap. And then Dan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what they lay out here as we go through this. So based on NEVA's State Alive and their recent committee meetings, they came away with basically 5 things they recommend to focus on in 2025. First thing, targeted tax relief and grants. They want tax credits and grants for independent venues and promoters, especially in emerging markets. They look closely at the dedicated funds like the Tennessee Music Fund my buddy Jamie Kent is establishing here in the state based on taxes around hotel occupancy and parking. They want ticketing reform. Everybody wants ticketing reform, Dan. Disclose their support for federal disclosure laws around dynamic pricing and fees. Nothing new there. They're also advocating for enforcement of antitrust laws against vertically integrated services. I wonder who that could be. The third thing, workforce development initiatives. They want some government-supported training like NEVA's venue operations experience to help bring forward the next generation of venue operators and promoters. They want to focus on unrepresented staff, crew, and entrepreneurs. The fourth thing, venue discovery and certification. This was kind of interesting. They wanted an official independent venue certified designation and a national fan discovery tool or app to drive traffic to those certified venues. We've got a similar one here in Nashville, Live 615. Last, number 5, insurance regulation. They're lobbying for reform so a venue can purchase liability and event cancellation insurance at reasonable rates and protect against climate liability risks. So we can sit around, Dan, and we can talk about this. I kind of want to break it down because I think you've got an interesting perspective on this from the venue and promoter side of things. But as much as this is woe is me and the waters are getting choppy out there, certainly, I think that, there's some of these ideas that are great, some of these ideas that need a little challenging and are just hard questions to wrap our head around. So what do you make of their report? 64% of stages operating at a loss, 58 or 68% of them anticipating a worse year in 25. What does that say about the market today?
It's never been harder to play this game. Acts want more money. The economy is uncertain. People are definitely finding less dollars for their entertainment money. There are priorities that have to come, credit card debts at an all-time high. People are taking that seriously now. It's harder to make a dollar right now than it's been. When we came out of COVID, people wanted to be together. They wanted to gather. They wanted to dance. They wanted to come out. We've had a really easy time of that for the first 2.5 years. Then we had the election. Things got tough. It loosened up a little bit in February, but it got tough again. I'm operating at a profit, but it's a thin line and it's harder than it's ever been. People want to see a show they're not going to necessarily see next year. They want special things. That farewell tour that they actually believe is a farewell tour, that this artist is so old I may never get to see them again. This lineup is so special, they're never going to replicate it again. This act is so amazingly important for me to see right now. I'm not going to take a risk missing. Anything that is average or can be easily picked up next year, people are going to wait. And we're seeing it at the box office and we're seeing the empty seats. It's only the amazing stuff that you're seeing things blow out. And even some of those big, amazing shows that we thought would blow out aren't.
I think we've known this has been this way for a minute now, right? I think when NEVA came to the table here in the report were some recommendations that, are some solves, but do they take this all the way to the point of solving this? Or is this more like a macro thing that we're just going to have to wade our way through a boom and bust cycle?
As much as it's nice that NEVA has brought all these people together, they're all entrepreneurs. And to get any of them to row in the same direction would be a challenge, but to get them all to row in the same direction is unrealistic. You got 7 people to agree that they're going to do this new thing, that they're not going to go above it. They're going to allow it. These are the rules. You'll get 1 to say, I'll take all your shows. There'll be one more guy that comes in and undercuts them all, because that's what entrepreneurs do. You find one guy that's willing to do it differently than everybody else and take the risk. And maybe he's right. Maybe he makes less on 8 shows that he would have made on 1 by holding out, but he'll make more money by doing all 8 shows, right? So that's what's happened, is you find this one aggressive guy that fucks up the whole gang of everybody else. And historically, you've always seen this, whether it be pro wrestling, whether it be sports teams, whether it be music promoters. It doesn't matter. When you get a bunch of entrepreneurs that are used to calling the shots, everybody agrees to come together and form this union and follow the rules, and then one guy just can't. And historically, that's been the problem. So my guess is that's what happens, is you'll still have somebody upsetting the apple cart and giving the acts the extra money that nobody else wants to, just to get the act, because they don't get the act normally. And by stepping up and paying what everybody else won't, we'll get them in the game for the first time.
So what do you think? I mean, what they're saying here is 64% of stages running at a loss. That's obviously not sustainable. The suggestions they're making to reduce the burden and make it a little easier for venues, is there going to be enough time to implement this stuff before this really is some sort of existential crisis? How quickly are tax relief and grants going to come into play? Ticketing reform, for God's sakes, like regulatory environments are just too slow for this stuff. Like, is this really shooting a BB at a tank when it comes down to it all? Or like, is any of this stuff here in this report actually going to help the economic environment be better for venues?
Change happens slowly, always has. It'll eventually get there, but just when you have all the answers, they'll change the questions. That's not the issue. The free market has always dealt with the market. And that's what's going to happen here. We're going to have less venues because venues aren't going to all make it. And you'll constantly have a change up of who's operating the venues, what venues make it, what new venues emerge. And you're seeing harder competition in the venue space, because you're seeing these rooms like the Anthem in DC or the Mission in Denver popping up. Just what AEG just did in Nashville. It's changing the game, because venues are being invested in at a much higher level. Whether it's indies, whether it's AEG, whether it's Live Nation, doesn't matter. What you're seeing is the venue game is being lifted to a much higher level than it's ever been before. So you're going to see some venues fall, but you're going to see new venues arise. And a lot of these new venues that are coming up are going to push down some of these other venues, because acts want to play the cool rooms. Always have. The new room, the cool room, the hot room. The Anthem changed everything. The Mission changed everything. That's what's the reality of the business. The free market will continue to make the correction.
So what are you saying for these independent venues, Dan? Like, take an investor or die, basically?
No, I mean, look, the 930 is an independent venue. The Anthem, it owns the 930. It's all Seth and his team, right, at IMP. So you don't have to take on money from somebody, although not the worst thing in the world taking investment on if you know what you're doing. And if you got a good solid plan that people are going to invest in, why not? But the competition is rising. So depending on what level you're playing and what market you're playing in, you're probably going to have to build up a little bit and do something different. And that means some won't make it. It's Darwinism at its finest. Only the strong will survive this. And it's going to be a reward for both the acts and the fans, because we're going to have better venues, because a lot of those shitholes need to go.
I think we should get Stephen Parker on this podcast, Dan. What do you think? Sit down with NEVA executive director, have a little conversation with him about this. Let's see where his head's at.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
Let's do it. Next piece of news of the month here, Dan. We cited the New York Post in a rumor the first time we talked about this thing, mostly in jest, right? But it was real. The New York Post called it. Taylor Swift bought her masters back. We called it speculative. We called it symbolic. We called it a turning point if it happened. And here's the day, Dan. So on May 30th, Taylor Swift did successfully buy back all 6 albums of her masters. Fully owned, deal done. And what some are calling a final boss move, Swift reportedly paid between $300 and $360 million to buy back the original 6 albums that had been sold to Shamrock Capital. And with that, Swift gets control. She can retire those old versions or re-release box sets. She can remaster a bundle with the new formats. She gets to keep a hold of her legacy. She's headed towards her 4th decade in music, which is crazy. And now she gets to own that narrative end to end. And she also gets the investment. Those things are still spinning off so much cash. And as long as the rights marketplace doesn't cool off, buying them now may be cheaper than holding out for longer. And closure. She already won the war. Now she owns the whole battlefield, Dan. So Scooter Braun, Shamrock Capital, Taylor Swift saga finally comes to an end. Taylor, the queen of all things Taylor, owning her masters.
It's nice to see that she got what Brian Wilson would have called his babies back. That and I'm sure she looks at them the same way Brian did, that those were her babies and she wants her songs back. So obviously that's a huge emotional win, not only a financial one. And clearly the fans will listen to him. I'm just curious, and I think it'll come out in an interview sooner or later with Taylor, which she'd rather her fans listen to now that she owns them all, Taylor's version or the original versions. And my guess would be in a lot of cases, as she's grown as an artist, she probably prefers the second recording over the first recording, just because the songs evolve over time and you become a better musician over time. So my guess is, as a musician, she probably prefers the second recording.
I mean, yeah, she certainly has devalued her own product in releasing those Taylor's versions, and I think they're objectively better in some cases for it. Now she gets to own both, Now it doesn't matter. It's all on the same pie.
Bruce Hornsby used to say, we may play them a little differently later in life because first we record them in the studio, then we go on the road and learn how to play it.
I just can't wait to see what she does with this bundle of rights that she now owns 25 years from now. I mean, we're seeing historic exits from people like, Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan at the end of their careers, rolling up $400-500 million sales. I mean, this is Taylor's end of things has got to be worth a couple billion when she's all said and done. It'll be a crazy thing to witness in 20-30 years.
Ironically, I was watching an old Beach Boys story, movie of the week, I believe aired on ABC originally, where Brian Wilson's father sold the rights to their back catalog when they were considered oldies, right, in like 79 or 80 for a ridiculously low amount of money, like $400,000 or something, and said, I can't believe I got that much money for them. No one's ever going to listen to those songs again. They're worthless. And what the Beach Boys back catalog must be worth today, let alone had you owned it for the last 45 years?
Who knows? Well, I guess we could ask Irving, an icon artist that now owns most of the Beach Boys catalog. So we should get Olivier on here and ask him some questions.
Another good idea. You're just chock full of good ideas.
Chock full of good ideas today, Dan.
You're the Luke Pierce of Luke Pierceism today.
Peak Luke today.
You're at 11 of a Luke.
11 of a Luke. Last thing here, Dan, just, intersection of the Supreme Court and music doesn't happen that often, but another music rights case here that's worth discovering. Of course, you might remember the Thinking Out Loud lawsuit that was brought on behalf of the Marvin Gaye estate against Ed Sheeran. On June 16th, the Supreme Court declined to hear the final appeal of the long-running copyright case against Ed Sheeran. So the case had been floating through the courts since 2016, almost 10 years now. And for those of you that were sleeping under a rock for that time frame, that allegation was that Sheeran lifted the harmonic progressions and rhythmic patterns Marvin Gaye classic. And in 2023, a federal jury found Sheeran not liable. So this was Marvin Gaye's estate appealing for this, and that appeal got tossed. And now with the Supreme Court declining to hear it, it's finally over. So what's the takeaway? Not hearing something in court, that doesn't mean much, right? Well, actually, it's not about the ruling on the merits. It's just the court refusing to hear that case. So the message is clear. There's a line between influence of how you write a song and infringement of a right. You can't copyright chord progressions or grooves. There's only so many permutations of those things in the world. And if you try, the courts don't seem eager to upend musical history just to enforce it. So that's good news for songwriters, Dan, especially in an era when everyone's influenced by everyone all the time. So it also means the industry is still in this kind of like murky waters phase, because even though Ed won, it took millions in legal fees, expert witnesses, and almost a decade of uncertainty to hear this out. So until Congress or the Copyright Office defines clear musical boundaries, we're going to keep seeing cases like this pop up. But at least for now, if your hook isn't a lifted vocal melody, you're probably in safer waters than where you were 5 years ago.
There's a lot going on there. Hey, Luke, before we let this go, I also want to talk about pro wrestling news, as it is entertainment. WWE is supposed to air from Saudi Arabia this week, Night of Champions, June 28th. Rumors are TKO has been having financial difficulties. Those are rumors. And WWE reportedly being paid a fortune for bringing the show to Saudi Arabia. What this could cost due to the bombing in Iran, and will they cancel? Will they not cancel? If they cancel, how much will this cost them? Can they protect their artists, their performers, their wrestlers? It'll be really interesting. We're recording on the 24th, which is Tuesday night. We don't know what they're going to do yet. My gut is they'll play the dates out, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens this week with those shows in particular.
Is this, I guess there's a couple things I take away from that, Dan, right? One, I'm not surprised that TKO, with its heritage and legacy from Ari, who did initially take some money from PIF, from the Saudi Investment Fund initially, before refusing it and turning back after all the talent represented by his company revolted. This is now being a separate entity that is, needs it, and to go take a check from the Saudis doesn't seem like a surprising business move by any means. Let me just say that. The signaling interest of how bad it is to take that, I think I would say that there's probably a marketplace over there, right? Like, this is a global sports brand. It's a global entertainment brand. There's fans over there.
I mean, I get the sense that maybe the government helps fund things like this come over because it looks good for tourism. And we should also say that it's reported through internet sources that they're bleeding money. Who knows what's real? We certainly don't have the data to back that up. But the rumors have been floating around quite a bit.
So, are you surprised by any of this, Dan? Truly, is this do you think this is going to make a difference to their business? Is the average wrestling fan concerned with the human rights violations of Saudi Arabia or whatever else comes with the moral objections to sending your product over there?
I think it's probably not a huge Venn diagram of the overlap of those circles. But it's an interesting thing that TKO was able to wrap up into one bundle: UFC, WWE, and Bull Riders. I think they're three great brands, and I think that there is obviously some synergy between their arena deals and their touring and their packaging and what William Morris Endeavor altogether can do with all of those things with TKO. I think there's something solid there. So my guess is that regardless of what they paid for it, I think in the long run, those are some really solid brands. It'll be interesting to see what happens because they announced WWE was going to do WrestleMania in New Orleans this upcoming year, and they've moved it back to Vegas after they made that announcement, after last year was so successful. But it's a really weird thing that they had announced their biggest brand was going to be in New Orleans, and then they yanked it, moved it back to Vegas. That's an odd thing to do publicly after something on that level had been. It's equivalent to them moving the Super Bowl after it's announced and moving it to city. Who does that?
How big was that check, right? It comes down to it.
It was said that the Fountain Blue presentation with WWE on all of the additional Fan Fest things was really well received. And what they did at the stadium at Alliance was apparently great. I watched it on Peacock. It seems like they've got a great thing going on there. Curious to see what's going to come next. Obviously, Vince McMahon being out of the mix there is a huge change, but it seems like they got a good thing going on with Triple H running content. And there are new days over there, so we'll keep watching.
Indeed.
Now, their opinions may have changed, but not the fact that they're always right. Huh? Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
Of course, it would not be an episode of Promoter 101 without the tweets of the month. Dan, what were you thinking about this month? Let's start with this. When a winning date has to move for things totally beyond your control. #no.
It always catches you off guard. It's just the worst thing in the world. You start counting those eggs before they hatch.
How about this one? You never have to regret being kind.
It's pretty simple, but it tends to be true.
Or this one, Dan. The music industry as an investment is not for the weak of heart.
Man, I don't know who thought it was a good idea to put money in this industry. Clearly we did. But man, is it a fucking roll of the dice. And usually the cards are stacked against you.
It's getting choppy out there. That'll do it for Tweets of the Month. Make sure you follow Dan for more of these gems. He's at The Jew over on X.
They thought they wanted careers. Turns out they just wanted paychecks. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
Dan, very excited for this month's feature interview. We're joined by Ollie Rosenblatt from Senbla. He's a promoter and a producer who's grown from a London town business into a global business these days. Excited to have him on the podcast.
Jumping over the pond, welcoming back Ollie Rosenblatt from Senbla. Ollie, it has been a massive, massive jump in your career since we last talked. You've been acquired by Sony. You've grown a massive outdoor setup. You're working in all sorts of spaces, not just music, but you're doing packaging and films and orchestras. And it just seems like you're growing in every direction. So much going on. Thank you so much for making time for us on Promoter 101 once again.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be back. And yeah, it's changed a lot since we last spoke, which is amazing. We're very grateful for it all. I've got to keep going, keep growing it. Got no choice.
Got no choice. That sounds like somebody who joined a large corporation, Ollie.
No, but
Build
my
it
own
by
account.
10 to 20% every year.
Well,
No, got no choice because that's the way I'm wired. I got to keep trying to, do better than what we did before. Look at where, we can expand in a good way. Look at how we can do the right things. Not just, I don't think it's even like quantity, it's quality and doing things which we feel are kind of in our DNA, and trying to see where our kind of the pillars of our business lie and can grow, and then give us that opportunity to expand in different areas and try and develop new pillars that could become kind of stables of the business, as opposed to just trying to do just huge more and more volume. And I think that's when it can become a bit more challenging.
So when you're talking about your DNA, you're second generation promoter, right? Because your dad was in the business as well.
Not my dad. No, he's a lawyer. He was very passionate about opera. I love opera, grown up with it. And so he was, as a philanthropic kind of endeavor, he kind of did a lot for the world of opera and singers. But he's a lawyer.
But that was your introduction to music, is your dad's love of opera.
Yeah, well, it was in my household. Music was always in my household. My mom, my dad, everyone really. But, I suppose it is in my DNA because Brian Epstein was my grandmother's nephew.
There it is.
Yeah, so that was, I suppose it is in my DNA. And my grandparents and my dad's parents met at his 21st birthday. And then my mum's mother was his aunt. So, yeah, it's like there's a link all round.
you've taken a different seat now, joining Sony. Has that kind of like ethos evolved since you started Senbla to when you joined Sony Masterworks and your present iteration of Senbla today?
No, I think it's at the heart of what we do. I think I don't think you can be in this industry if you're not deeply passionate about it and have a love for it. And, the thing is, even when some shows, we've all been there, don't go your way, I've still been in the audience and gone, God, that was a great show. And, you forget about the challenges or the fact that it might not have made money and you kind of in awe about the show that's just happened. And I think that is always a kind of a check myself kind of point of view, because that shows that I still love and care about the industry and what I do and deeply passionate about the music. And, I think I think this is a hard business to be in generally. It's tough as you got to put a lot of hours in, a lot of work. You're taking risks. You can't do it unless you love it in some shape or form. And I was just talking to the guys today actually in the office about the last weekend we've just had, and I was telling everyone how proud I was of everyone, because it was an amazing kind of effort everyone had put in, team effort, where we're not a massive team at all by the number of shows we do. We're not a big team, but we punch hard and deliver on great things. And that's, I think, testament to the DNA that's in the company and what we stand for, how we approach things, the team nature of it, how we all work together, work our hardest, and we actually pull together, when times are challenging, and also to bring the successes in as well. And I think that's not in any way, shape or form gone away since I've joined forces with Sony.
Well, let's hammer in on that for a second. What does Senbla and Ollie stand for in this business? What exactly is that?
Well, I think when we're working with, artists, and it's more of a bespoke, I suppose, approach, a unique approach. We've come from, when I started the business, having to take on a more, I suppose, producer-led approach to some of the shows that we worked on. We had to show how we could add value to the artists we work with, whether that's just whether they feel like they've been undervalued, undercared for in the marketplace, and we think there's more opportunity for them to and take them on, try and reignite or reposition them in the market, which gives them a better chance of an opportunity to sell more tickets, whether it's creatively adding something to their business, they didn't have before. And then also, obviously, outside of the artist-driven stuff, the more kind of IP-led stuff we do a lot of, that is a more performing arts kind of based, I suppose, approach to in a traditional kind of concert touring market. So a lot of the films and concert stuff we do. So we try and bring a more creative approach, I suppose, bespoke approach, hands-on approach to the stuff we do. With the outdoor stuff that we've just had, we're focused on trying to make sure that we are looking at the best sites possible, unique sites, things where they're befitting of a special artist because it's a special site, not just going for volume. That's a different model to what we're in. And we're much more focused on how we can add value and position things differently and have a bit, like I said, a bit more producer-promoter approach on things. I mean, we still have volume. I mean, we've got 500-600 shows this year that we're promoting in the UK, internationally producing another, I suppose, 200 with our IP-based stuff. But, the IP part of the business is definitely different to, I think, what else is going on in the marketplace.
You've always had this kind of reputation for like this kind of innovative productions, orchestral experiences all around that IP.
Yeah.
What makes a project worth pursuing for you?
That's an really interesting question. I think strength of the title is obviously, you have to be able to believe that the show and feel that the show or the title can deliver a certain number of sales in the marketplace. And I think global international reach, I think, is probably, more important than ever, actually, on these titles, because we have the ability to work it through the network that we have in Sony in terms of on the live business that we're across, and therefore maximize the opportunity of that IP across the globe. So I think an international opportunity is really important. And I think something which also could be different and interesting, that's not just a more traditional in-concert experience in this IP world. Nothing wrong with them at all. I mean, we have them, and I think, seasonality is an important part of that as well. So our Christmas traditional films and concerts is a huge place in our roster. And we're very focused on how we develop them and deliver them in the marketplace. I mean, at Christmas, we do, I think, nearly 50 of those films and concerts across the UK. In terms of, we tour, different 3-4 different films for a number of shows. But then also you have the opposite end of the spectrum, like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Across Spider-Verse. And that was such an interesting score. Daniel Pemberton, the composer, is amazing. And such just an interesting, innovative composer and great guy. And, when we sat with him to talk about it in concert, he brought a fresh approach to how we, to presenting it, in terms of we were on the same page with that. And, that score is like a punk rock hip hop score with some symphonic elements to it, but also with a DJ, have scratching in the score. So we said, look, why don't we bring a scratch DJ and put it on every show? So you've got a scratch DJ doing all the sounds and scratching on every live show with the symphony, with the orchestra around it. And that element brings a whole different kind of, I suppose, flavor to the show and to the experience that people are having. And so, we look for things where there's interesting musical elements, and also whether the content is obviously ultimately we feel good enough and that's going to capture people's imaginations enough to come and see it in concert. Not all of these work. Sometimes you present something which, is a great score, great film, but just doesn't quite spark the imagination that you need to do the business properly. So sometimes as well, looking at niche product, when we say niche, you feel small, but there can be, Avatar: The Last Airbender, for example, which is Nickelodeon kind of animation. We co-produce that internationally. And at first you think that's a kind of niche product, but actually it's a global sensation. But it's very, very particular, the demographic and the age, because it was, it's a huge nostalgic kind of play for people to go and see that and hear that in concert. But, last year that did over 450,000 tickets globally sold, literally global. And so, you get those, and that's an amazing thing. And Spider-Verse has done over 100 concerts last year and the year before as well. Serious fan bases, which is something we also look out for, dedicated fan bases. And then it comes down to, does this does this product work in this concert setting, and can we make it interesting for people?
So that's an excellent kind of recap of like what you're screening for when you go through this process. What does that actual process for licensing and producing shows around this IP heavy content look like for you?
I don't want to give the game away, baby. No, so look, we deal with IP license holders, the studios. So, sometimes it's a collaborative effort. The studio want to, have a new title coming on stream, which has been very successful, and they want to look at engaging the fan base in a different way. They know the in-concert experience can be really interesting for that and different. And sometimes it's used as also part marketing exercise for them because they've got the other film coming down the track if it's part of a franchise. So then it's a more collaborative approach with them to kind of work out. That was much like Spider-Verse was actually, and they had this great piece of IP and they wanted to say, how can we do something cool with it and different? And then they had the new film coming out. And other times it's a look, we're looking at the roster and the IP of the studios and saying, hey, we approach them and say, we want to present this as an in-concert experience if we've thought about it. And we go through a process with them. And then other people like with Disney that we do a lot of work with, they have their own reasons for doing certain titles and bringing certain titles on stream, and they definitely look at the kind of broader picture as well in terms of what does doing this film in this setting mean for this franchise, and they obviously air traffic control for them, as it were, is a big thing. So they have to look at their whole slate, what's out in the theater market, what's out in the Disney on Ice market, what experiences, exhibitions, and then they kind of look and see what titles they think could work and why. And so we're part of that process when helping to deliver that. So it varies from studio to studio. Sometimes, as I said, it's more a collaborative approach because of a decision and needs of the studio, and other times we think this is going to work in an in-concert experience and license it off them like that.
So you're both like incoming and outgoing here. Like you're both in the front end, maybe of new IP projects from the studio side of things, but you're also kind of evaluating the marketplace for a strong title that you think would do well and translate into a live setting. Correct.
Exactly.
So on the IP side of things and that partnership, can you just like kind of give us a high level of kind of what that looks like? You're sometimes partnering with the studios? Like where are you driving kind of your marketing assets and your ideation on how to like push these things?
It's all studio by studio, and it depends on the assets the studio have in that particular title, and also in terms of how, and that can also be how old is this particular piece of IP? How relevant it is this day and age? What have they done with it recently? What assets do they have? How engaged are the creators, the filmmakers, the people in the studio, the director, the composer? That varies completely depending on the IP. And again, where it sits in the kind of life cycle of the studio. Is it a fresh IP? Is it an existing IP part of a franchise? Is it something that's just been sat on the shelf and they just, traditionally goes out on TV? It all depends. So we work in accordance with what the studio can and can't do and doesn't have. Our Christmas tradition, films and concerts, the studio's not engaged in that as such, apart from licensing it. We're given assets and we have to abide by those assets. In other times, we are fully involved with the creators in the studio to help create the artwork and assets and dealing with the filmmakers and dealing with the composer. And so it just varies on a case-by-case basis, really. Sometimes there's just lack of assets from a certain film because they just didn't have the same kind of level of detailed assets that they do these days because it might be an older film or piece of IP. Or they can't do much with it because there's a huge amount of legalities in this as well, depending on what the studio have done with and deal they've done with the talent in the band, and what the impact that therefore that has on when they're exploiting these works in a different kind of setting. So case by case.
Do you have like a buy box for what those things look like from like the more legacy, not frontline driven strategies on that stuff? Like, are you looking for stuff that's like, it's not just strong title, but like involvement from creators? Like, is there like data or metrics that you're looking at that kind of help you inform that decision making
Yeah, I
process?
mean, we look at engagement on the social media channels, for when there is some from your IPs. Again, a Spider-Verse is a good example because it's a mix of lots of these questions is really tied in. The composer's very engaged on social media, on X, and so we see how his audience responds to what he puts up. There's a lot of activity on and there was a lot of activity on TikTok across them. That was a meme was created from after the first film, which kind of went viral. And so we look at what is the market, how the market engaging in it, from a kind of on a kind of what I suppose now standard media like social media formats. And then we look at box office revenue numbers, but actually that can be misleading because most people will go out with saying, well, this was a huge film. It's going to be a huge success. The box office was enormous. Loads of people are going to buy tickets for this. It doesn't always work that way. You can have the biggest, and I always say you should not get, easy to get confused or excited by the idea of the box office being huge, but don't let it drive your decision making because it can be very misleading because you could have a box office which has gone humongous. It's caught fire. People go crazy for it. They want to go and see it, but they won't go back again. But obviously, the box office doesn't give you that indication. It just tells you a number, like $1 billion at the box office. That is also about, does this film have legacy to it, a legacy opportunity? I always think with when there's a new film coming out, which has got a huge amount of, good box office, really good box office, a huge amount of exposure, a lot of hype, does well at all the awards, that's the time to get on it straight away and do a tour. If you leave it a year, it's died down. People have moved on to the next thing. And actually, that's when you see the real sales, impact. But if it's a film which lasts, it will find its place in the market and it can be revitalized. And a great example of this is like La La Land, for example. When we did La La Land, when it first came out, and it was very tied in with the studio, and it was fantastic, and it was winning all the awards, and it was great.
Ollie, is there a difference between what will work in Europe and what will work in America, or does it always translate 1 = 1 as far as sales with
No.
film?
Well, I mean, it depends. We're in America, obviously, that's, and we're in Europe. I mean, but, there are definitely stronger markets for this than others. And part of that is down to the promoter, but, in terms of how active the promoters are in this field. Part of it is down if you're selling into or doing deals with symphony orchestras or, it all depends. Market. There are similarities in some markets, but it's not a like for like comparison. I mean, look, we're lucky enough to do, PAC tours of some of these films in concert because of the way we've managed to structure it. And then some have been direct to symphonies, and so we can see in the market where has done well and where, hasn't, and where maybe there's a more mature market for these things and where there's a less mature market. So it just varies.
I feel like the story I'm telling myself is that there's some comparison between your work and let's say comedy here in the States, right? Where streaming is a huge driver for things. You don't necessarily get box office reports from studios and this side of things. So measuring the impact of call it second run on an IP project that's going from theatrical exhibition to streaming can really extend the life of a project and kind of create cult classics on that front of things. I've heard from comedy managers that, Netflix, Amazon, lesser extent Hulu, they're a relatively opaque black box when it comes down to data and consumption, just high level aggregate sort of things. Have you found a way to kind of peel back the discerning audiences from Second Life on streamers to kind of pick up opportunity, or are you relying on the same Luminate or whatever metrics that everybody is using?
Yeah, we're not getting any more metrics, I'd say, than others. We might get some more info from the studio on what other activity they're looking at and they've got, which might give you an indication about the franchise. With Avatar, for example, Last Airbender, we didn't go, this is going to go global. We said, look, let's do a London show. Let's start out with that. We're going to do a San Francisco, and we're going to do a King's Theatre in New York. And we're going to, and we're going to basically treat them as kind of tryout test shows. We're going to build the show we're going to basically work them in as a kind of like a more kind of well-rounded kind of, I suppose, like a theatrical model where you're just, you're showcasing something and then you're building on it thereafter. But what we realized is when we put it on sale, I mean, it just completely flew out the door. And we thought, so then we thought, well, there clearly there is something in this title. So we added another show, and then we had another show, and then it was like, right, we better look at a PAC tour very seriously here, and then we started testing the market internationally with people, and then they were very, very, they were very keen on it. So, but we didn't go straight in going like, here is like, a huge tour. We had to kind of build up to it and go and give obviously the sales data and take the risk on ourselves. But that's also the beauty of us being a promoter and producer all wrapped up in one, because we're creating the show, and then obviously we're creating the show, taking the risk on creating it, putting our money where our mouth is. In that sense, we're going to do the same on the promoting. So for the studios, they've got a direct kind of line into the exploitation of the project, because we're not going to produce it if we're not going to promote it.
Yeah. I think it's worth just maybe in this conversation kind of taking a step back into your work with Sony Masterworks and what platform you've kind of built across UK and then with your partners in the United States, and maybe talk a little bit about Terrapin, because I think I have some questions that kind of talk about the importance of like global business versus just a UK business, and what your strategy looks like given now that you have partners in the US, and opportunities and what challenges that creates on that kind of thing. So as we kind of touched on at the last or at the top of the interview, you've joined Sony Masterworks, really built an awesome, lean but impactful team, not only in the UK, but here in the States with Terrapin and Jonathan Shank. So can you kind of just talk us through like how this Sony Masterworks deal came about for you? And then as a follow-on question, how you got introduced to Shank and what that partnership looks like from inside your businesses?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I suppose I was lucky enough to have people, different organizations at one point interested in Senbla, wanting to look at an acquisition and talking about it with us and making offers. And I remember I was somewhere and I bumped into my colleagues that are at RG Live that sit next to me, and they're the huge man in the light trail space, and they're historically classical promoters, and they still do a lot of classical kind of music led stuff and other bits, and they do in the live concert world, but they do a lot of huge amount of global light trails. So I was kind of I saw them at an event, and they said, and they kind of mentioned that Sony were kind of, that they said that they were interested in having a conversation with me, and so would I be? So I said yes, and it just felt like the right fit compared to other promoters or live entertainment businesses that were talking to us about it, and I just, because I thought for what we do, a more entrepreneurial sort of produced approach of things, it's kind of, the kind of toy box analogy, what have they got in the toy box that is going to be, aligned with our kind of thinking, and I think I've been right in that kind of, and I believe it's been a great kind of, coming together, interest in growing the live entertainment business globally. And so I know a lot of people in the world that were also kind of independents, and people we work with, people like we just came across, that stayed friendly with. And so that gave us an opportunity to kind of say, look, why don't we try and develop and grow this international kind of, live entertainment company and be different to the other people in the market. Don't just be out and out promoters, because then you're kind of competing in the same world other people are. Be a business which can develop different products and have different businesses in different markets that can serve that product for different reasons. So whether that is a promoter in that market, or whether it's an agent in that market, or whether it's a producer in that market, and you're all and also obviously promoting different territories. So you're being able to get different pieces of product and feeding it through the system globally. So again, our IP is a great example. We have a business in the company in Sony called GEA, which act as agents and producers mainly in Europe, but they also produce internationally, and they sell internationally as well outside of Europe. So for our stuff, we work co-produce stuff with them, but then they also sell our product internationally for us. And then in the US, we have Roadco internally, which then do all the US touring for the PAC circuit for us. So again, it's a great example of being able to producing, us promoting the shows in the UK and everyone, and we also co-promote in Australia. But so kind of establishing the kind of live experience of a product, taking it and then funneling it through the network to be, basically, utilized throughout the whole network. So everyone in the whole business is benefiting, and bringing it into the marketplace quicker. So that's just, a good example of how that works. And, Terrapin, you mentioned, again, they talk about differentiation of businesses. They're an out and out kind of producer focused a lot on family entertainment. And so that, again, is they've got their world, they're talking about, bringing Disney Junior internationally, which they do. And we did it in the UK for them in London in March. And then that's going out throughout the world through another company of ours called Proactive. So again, that's a great example of feeding it through the network. Jonathan, great guy, producing it in the US, utilizing that relationship, creating that product, and then funneling through to the rest of the world throughout the group of promoters and local producers and promoters.
When you say Jonathan, you mean Jonathan Shank?
Jonathan Shank, I do.
Dan probably is chomping at the bit to take some credit for the Ollie and Shank introduction.
No, so sorry that you asked how I met. So that was fun. So yes, so how we met was through our guy Steiny here, who put us all both on a panel in San Francisco at Polestar. It was an independent promoters panel, wasn't it?
Yes, we were all independent at one point.
Yeah, we're all.
And so we were hoping you guys were going to follow my breadcrumbs to Live Nation, both of you. But you guys found each other and
found each other
Sony.
And became, great friends and colleagues. So yeah, and it's been amazing. So thank you, Steiny.
Well, happy accident, but I think that was meant for you guys to come wind up over at LN. But
absolutely,
I'm glad you guys found your check one way or another and found each other.
It was great. It's great. And that, but those are, and that's, and so, that's part of the mix of this kind of, I suppose, global non-traditional entertainment company, where we do have a lot of, artist-driven content, concerts, indoor, outdoor, all different scale. We have IP and we have exhibitions and we have theatrical, a Broadway business, a local West End business here. That is producing also internationally. And so and we get involved in co-producing theatre, involved in how we can help those businesses as well. And also, investing in theatre and getting involved in live experiences, exhibitions. So, it's non-traditional, but we also have a business that's solely focused and specialized in those areas as well internationally.
How would your business be different today had you still been an independent and not paired up with Sony? How has that changed your business?
Well, we've had opportunity to expand our global footprint with, how I just mentioned, with these other businesses that we've brought in and on board, which I'm, kind of more involved with, brought some of them into Sony. And obviously there is a more of a one Sony approach where we're trying to be more proactive across the kind of different lines of the Sony businesses, from Sony Pictures and Television to Sony Music and Publishing, and the gaming side of it. And that doesn't mean that we can't work with other studios, because we do a lot, and that's great, and and that's how it should be. But we also, there's also a more deep-rooted focus on how we can, exploit and develop and grow the opportunity within the Sony kind of companies. And
you didn't answer my question though.
Well, I know. I did answer your question, but you've got a different answer in your mind.
No, I'm curious how how your business would be different if you weren't.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, do I? So I don't bloody know.
Okay. Well, that's a great answer.
It's like saying, what are you going to eat in 3 weeks' time on a Tuesday?
Well, hopefully lox.
I think we were developing at a good pace beforehand. Then we would continue to do interesting things, and the core business hasn't really changed like that, but we're just doing more. And we've had the development of the business around us has created more opportunity for everyone, but we've been very much spearheaded that development of those businesses as well. So
it sounds like it just poured lighter fluid on the ability to expand your business.
Yes.
Do you think that you always had that global ambition, or do you think that, like, seeing the horsepower of a kind of global enterprise and platform that you've now joined changed your ambition in any way?
I've always had that global ambition, but Sony is a global powerhouse, and they've been great partners and continue to be. So and they have the shared vision of how we can expand this live entertainment opportunity. So and they're one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world, and with a global footprint in lots of different areas. So, that instead when I talk about back to the kind of, the toy box analogy for our business, that made perfect sense because we have a view of live entertainment in terms of what we do, maybe slightly in a different way than other companies, like I said, because we have a more produced, as well as promoted led view, and maybe a bit more creative led view of how we deliver entertainment. That's why that kind of works.
If you produce a show and you promote a show, do you need an agent in the middle?
Yeah, if we're going to take it internationally, yeah.
So just to expand your footprint globally outside of your promoter reach.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not if we're not going to create a show and then give it to an agent and then sell it us back. Although that has weirdly happened before.
One hell of an agent.
Someone pitched me on a show
commissions a date that you buy and sell yourself.
It was so funny, yeah. But shit happens.
Can we talk about an old mutual friend of ours who's now a reality television star by the name of Jesse Solomon and his appearance on Summer House now?
I was speaking to them the other day.
Well, I don't want to speak to any agents that you've taken things to Endeavor that have then repackaged it and sold it back to you, but Endeavor ran quite the envision there for a second. Jesse, in an interesting transition from agent in the kind of packaging world of things to now reality star / villain on Summer House, which
I know
I was shocked to learn. My girlfriend was watching it on TV, and I was like, "Holy shit, is that fucking Jesse Solomon on TV right now?"
Yeah, it's hilarious, and he's having a great time with it, and he's found his lane, at the moment. So long may it continue for him. He's wonderful. He's a love. The villain. I don't know. I haven't caught up with the latest season, but someone in my office loves it, and I heard could have been a bit shaky at one point, this season. So villain might be the right thing, but he's generally not a villain.
It's just an interesting world where folks like that.
He certainly didn't set out to be that. It was literally an opportunity that just came to him, I believe. And he was like, yeah, he's one of his great attitudes to life of just let's just try it out and go with it and have fun and enjoy. And I think that kind of, as a result, that opportunity came to him, and as a result of that, he kind of his own kind of view of the world. He just went for it, and I believe it's turned out great for him generally.
It seems like it has.
Yeah.
I don't know if Senbla has an idea of doing of any Bravo related or Peacock related reality shows
now,
but I think now you have the in, Ollie.
I've certainly got the in. I think it's quite funny because I was walking around New York with him and our mutual friend Alex Ravens, and he was everyone's coming up to him going, "Oh, I love you on Summer House. I love you on everywhere he went." And it was kind of like, what? And I think obviously Bravo is a much bigger thing in the US than here, but I think there is definitely an audience here for him, and growing. I think
Well, let's talk more seriously about the audience in the market in the UK being kind of your home base.
Yeah.
How would you characterize the UK audience right now? How is it kind of changed in a post-COVID, post-lockdown environment? What are things looking like over there?
Well, I think it's I do feel we're really back more than ever. I think that the idea of cost of shows and ticket prices and economic squeeze for people, I think, is always there and undercurrent, being there for a long time, and I think continues to be there. And I do think people maybe are being a bit more choosy about what they wish to spend their money on. I think headline touring, obviously, bigger for stadiums is bigger than ever, and I think probably the impact on the festival market. And we had Robbie Williams in Bath on the Royal Crescent, sold out like immediately 2 shows, 30,000 tickets, and that was amazing. And to my point earlier about matching iconic artists with iconic venues, I think when you get a mix like that, it really works. It's very potent and works very well. And so that's where we try and be, focused on in that side of things. I think it took a lot longer for audiences to come back properly than people probably had envisioned after COVID. There was, in the UK, there was, COVID obviously. It was a kind of start-stop approach to coming back to live entertainment. And just when you thought you were back, then there's Omicron, and then it was the impact of that. And then, then people were still, I remember doing one of our Michael Bublé shows in an outdoor setting, and he said to the audience, "Who here is their first show back since COVID?" And I think literally like over half the audience put their hand up, like if not more. And that was a good year, 2 years, 2022. That was, after the summer of 2022. So that's a big impact. And then in the UK, you had the kind of another mini financial crisis with with hiking interest rates and crash of the market through the Liz Truss economic kind of downturn. And then you had the war in Ukraine everywhere, which had a massive impact again on supply chain issues. And that was also compounded by the COVID supply chain issue. So I think it took a long time for people to be confident in coming back to shows properly and being able to spend their money. And things are generally more expensive. And if everything in your necessities goes up in cost, luxuries like going to a show and buying tickets for entertainment is going to suffer somehow. Because people they might want to come, but they might be more choosy about what they spend their money on, and inevitably our ticket prices have had to go up as well. So I do think in terms of, you get the right product and and all the stars align. I do believe there is, it's a buoyant market still for things, but I think it's a tougher market to sell tickets in as well. I think we're still seeing for our seasonal kind of shows it being strong. And I said Bath this weekend was great. We just had Sophie Ellis-Bextor tour in the UK, more tickets sold than she's ever sold in the UK, and sold out the Albert Hall very, very easily, well in advance. And, we're seeing things that people want to come to, they will buy for. But I think they're making harder choices about what they want to come to.
So why don't you walk us through kind of like the venues and places and events that you're operating in regularly in the UK? I'm talking about Robbie Williams. Congratulations on a fantastic
Thank you.
weekend in Bath. But, you're both inside, outside festival experiences, around the country in PACs. Like what's the general UK footprint for your
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, it's interesting because I talked about this in the meeting earlier, because I said, it's very, if you think back to the last week of shows that we've just had, we've had a Strictly Come Dancing tour just, come to an end of two of the big people on Strictly Come Dancing. We've had Sophie Ellis-Bextor, big pop, legacy pop artist, touring the UK, doing phenomenal business. And then we've also produced a show called Unholy, this podcast, which has never been done before live, with the two amazing kind of journalists called Jonathan Freedland and Yoni Levy. We had one of the kind of, I suppose, the foremost, biggest historian, philosopher, thinker of our time at the moment, Yuval Noah Harari, on it as a special guest artist, a special guest kind of speaker coming on, and so we and amongst other guests as well. And so we had this kind of incredible kind of live podcast, very, very serious thinking, heavy, about the Middle East, incredibly insightful and thought-provoking, with these amazing kind of minds, talking about what's going on in the world, in the Middle East particularly. And that was in the same week as then going off to do Sophie Ellis-Bextor to Royal Albert Hall as well, and Bath Royal Crescent with Robbie Williams, and other great artists, and in concert halls. So and we work generally across all the major theatres and concert halls in the UK, arenas as well, when we have the right show for it. And then we work in outdoor settings like Bath Royal Crescent and Wasing, which is our kind of 6,500 cap venue just outside Reading in Berkshire. And it's this beautiful kind of I suppose treescape amphitheatre in a woodland, a woodland treescape amphitheatre, and it's amazing, and it's very interesting and different, and the whole site is very focused on that side of things, so it's got a very, very holistic feel to the whole event, and it's a really beautiful setting, amazing setting. So that's a very, we had Paolo Nutini there last year, and Jungle and Crowded House, and we've had Jack Johnson there and and Ben Howard. So it's it's a really interesting space. So yeah, we're kind of across, traditional concert halls, Royal Albert Hall, Royal Festival Hall, the Barbican, Queen Elizabeth Hall, through to Coco, through to Birmingham Symphony Hall, Manchester Bridgewater Hall, through to all the theatres in the UK, basically, and to Arena, Wembley, Manchester Arena. We did arena tours this year as well. So right across the spectrum, really.
What's the future of Senbla that you see in the next couple of years? Where are you going from there?
I think we're going to continue on our journey of, doing the right outdoor shows with the right artist and the right setting, not trying to overcook that, developing our IP base, more IP product, continue to do the shows that really work in that space every year, making sure that, we have enough time in between them now. So yeah, we continue to do them in the right time, making sure there's enough space between, one tour to the next. Look at new IP, new opportunity in that space. Continue in our world of working with artists we can really deliver a great job on, and be kind of hands on and give a great kind of I suppose service to, and just keep doing what we're doing with quality, but continue to try and find new avenues and opportunities to present interesting things in concert and expand our international base more as well.
We can't thank you enough for making time and sharing some of that insight. I know you were a little hesitant to share some of that insider information, but it seemed like you were actually pretty forthcoming today with all the goods, and as you always are. So I got nothing but love for you, and I thank you so much for making time talking to us on Promoter 101 once again.
Appreciate it. Big love.
It's pretty obvious they never really grew up. They only learned how to act in public. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
It's the quote of the month. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. That one comes to us from Thomas Edison, Luke.
I think he did a few things, Dan. He probably tried and failed a few times.
History is written by the winners, my friend, and he certainly came out to be a winner in the end.
That indeed.
Your excuse to turn up the volume and drown out Karen from accounting. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Promoter 101. If you like what you heard today, if you have an idea or a complaint, whatever, hit us at steiny@promoter101.net. Or if you just miss us and you want to catch up.
Man, I wish we aired in video so people could see Connor's amazing goatee. It reminds me of the snowman in Elf. It's just awesome.
It looks really good, Connor.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen. You're too kind.
Well, thank you all for listening. We'll be talking to you again on July 31st and the last Thursday of every month moving forward in this new format, Luke.
I'm loving it, Dan. Month by month.
Our July episode will feature Tixer's Sarah Mertz.
Between now and July, we're wishing you sold out shows for the month to come.
Or at least some break-even dates with the way business is going out there. Even a break-even would be a good thing right now, Luke.
Hey, man, get out while you can.
Well, folks, that's all for us. Until next time, cheers.
Call your mother.
Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.